Hello everyone, Rest of Aquariumax here. I'm excited to be back on the stream. Newt Scamander, hello. Austin Gregory, the anonymous toucan, that's a cool name. And Maxwell Aquino, hello and welcome. Today we're going to start out with this desert vivarium. Let's see what's visible in here right now. I can see one of my desert beetles just a moment ago. There were several velvet ants traveling about, and we're more than likely to see some of those. Oh, there's one of the Dasimutilla gloriosa in the back. I don't know if you can see her from where you are. Oh, there she comes. She's in the shot now. So I have, how many velvet ants in here? 1, 2, 3, 7 velvet ants in here. 2 Dasimutilla gloriosa, 1 Dasimutilla nocturna, and 4 Dasimutilla vestita. And then I've got Eleotis obscurus, Eleotis hispalabris, and Cryptoglossa muricata, or the Beetles species that I have in here. So let's see. So we've got Elijah Armstrong and Reed Hagen. Oh, you've got some beetles too. I'm not sure how to say your name. Elijah? Kermit the Hermit Crab, greetings. Jay's Crazy Obsessions. And Mesogaster. Yeah, I can show some blue death feigning beetles. You can see 2 of my velvet ants right now and 1 other desert beetle, but I will do that. I'll show some blue death feigning beetles today. That's actually part of what I'm doing. I'm answering some Patron questions today near the beginning of the video, and for that's why I'm showing this particular vivarium today. And Newt Scamander, yes, like a fluffy koala bear, as Peter at Bugs in Cyberspace said. I like that term. I think it fits them well. Horrific Dude, Francisco Leon. Hello, Licinius, Elaine Smith. Excellent. And Elijah, you have clown beetles, desert clown beetles, and that's cool. That's the same. 2 of the species that I have here, Eleotis obscurus and Eleotis hispalabris, are considered desert clown beetles. So, and thank you, Maxwell. I appreciate that. Kingdom of Animals, hello. I'm hoping we can see some of the red and orange velvet ants as well. The species that I have, Dasimutilla vestita, of the red and orange ones, are rather secretive. They do come out at certain times of the day, but they tend to be a little more shy. So we'll see. The white ones are all over. And I have had other red and orange species that are very active during the day too and not as shy, but for some reason Dasimutilla vestita seems to be a little shy. So Bug Slayer has 3 blue death feigning beetles and wants some more varieties, specifically ironclad beetles. Those are very cool. I would like to do that at some point. See, now that I'm filming, things have calmed down a little bit. When I was just looking at the tank, things were going kind of nuts, but all right, let's see. Geocarcinus, howdy. And Matt M, hello. Licinius is asking if I cover how easy or hard it is to breed and keep death feigning beetles. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that to some extent today. Oh, now we're getting some more activity. Good. Yes. So, and Josh Doe, welcome to the stream. Crystals, Pets and Plants, hello. And Ken, you're in the house for me to answer your question. Excellent. So Maxwell, how big should your tank be? With how many do you have again? How many beetles? I'm trying to remember here. And I have kept hermit crabs. It's been a long time, many years, but I have done it. Elijah, I just got a ram cichlid. Nice. Kingdom of Animals. I'm sorry, this is an isopod question. How much do you allow your isopod to grow until it's too much, and what do you when they overpopulate? Well, I usually sell them when they overpopulate. Sometimes they end up being used as feeders if they overpopulate, and it just kind of depends on the size of your container. It depends on the species. It depends on a lot of different things. Also, how often you're changing the substrate, because you can get by with isopods at a higher population if you're changing the substrate more often so that they have and adding more leaves and things like that. So it's a difficult question to answer, but if I look at the colony, I think, I am throwing handfuls of new leaves in there every week and so on, and they just eat them all and they're gone and there are huge numbers in here, then I'm probably going to think I need a larger container. And that happens with dairy cows quite often. There are some other species that it doesn't happen with too often. So it's kind of looking at the situation holistically and thinking, how quickly is this group of isopods depleting the resources that I provide? And if it gets too much that I'm having a hard time keeping up with it, that's when I start switching them out to a larger enclosure. And okay, and Maxwell, you want to know for just 3? Well, you get by with a pretty small container. I've done 8 by 8 footprint containers or enclosures for isopods, or sorry, for 3 beetles in a container that small. All right, so Cullen asks, what's the easiest convenient food for desert beetles? I would say beetle jelly that you buy. They will eat it. In my experience, at least, they eat it. And super convenient to use. Doesn't spoil quickly. Doesn't mold. You just rehydrate it for a few times. As it's sitting in the enclosure, you can keep it in there a week or 2 and just rehydrate it when it kind of dries out. So probably the easiest. Slightly moistened cat food's another good one, or dog food. And Ziphos, that's how you say your name? I would try the Rapashi as a powder and see if they eat it. And thank you, Bible WordPress. 5-gallon long would be totally fine for 3 or 4 death fainting beetles. Super Ed's doing well. Thank you, Jay's Crazy Obsessions. Never kept vampire crabs, would like to now. What kind of driftwood? So there is cholla wood in here, but it's also, the other wood is just weathered sagebrush, because I can collect that just close to my house. Novske's in the house. Nice to have you here. So the anonymous toucan. How do you donate to me? Well, there's a couple different ways to do that. You can do a super chat here on the live streams if you like, and I always appreciate the super chats. You can check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/aquarimax. You can donate there. You can also use the affiliate links at the bottom of my videos to purchase something on Amazon, and that will help as well. So those are all options that you have for doing that, and I appreciate the question. Great question. So I want to make sure I get to Ken of the Kaiju Iso channel, quickly here, and then to Swanee. They're both Patreon members who ask questions today. So, and then I will catch up with the chat if I can. So here we go. I'm going to read the question out loud so everybody has an idea of what the question said, and then we'll go to it. So Ken of the Kaiju Iso channel says, I'm very interested in setting up a dry or arid desert type enclosure, but I can't think of just one question. What are the easiest critters to start with? Are they easy to find, or should I just buy them? Guess I'm really looking for a how-to setup. Anything you can say or talk about regarding desert critters is awesome for me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the setup here. Okay, the substrate varies depending on what you want to do. In this case, I do have some things other than sand, but the base is play sand. I also have some oak sawdust in here. I have some leaf litter. I have some compost kind of things like that, because that's better for beetle larvae. And you can see, I see one of the orange velvet ants in the background there. So the substrate should be 1 inch or 2 or 3, something like that. You have some wiggle room there. And then you have some options about what you can use as well. I have used just plain sand, and I've used other mixtures too. I would not recommend walnut shells. Some people do that, but I would not recommend that. Okay, and then you put a bunch of surface area in there. As you can see in my case, I collected some rocks. I got some cholla cactus in there, and I got the weathered sagebrush like I was talking about. And even a piece of cork bark that provides a little cave, because you want a lot of hides for the little critters in here. You can see I've got a little basking light up there. It's just an LED bulb in there, so it doesn't increase the temperature very much. I don't really need to. This room is fairly warm, so right now I tested with my temperature gun a few minutes ago. It's about 77 degrees on the cool side and around 80, 81 on the warm side. maybe a little warmer right under the light. So I don't want it to get too hot, but they do like it a little bit warm. So it's nice to provide a little bit of a thermal gradient too. You don't want the entire thing to get too warm. So they have plenty of places to hide out and thermoregulate a little bit. For food, you can see I have a little beetle jelly cup. That's the Asian beetle jelly I bought from Peter at Bugs in Cyberspace right there. Or this might actually be one of the ones he sent me when he sent me the beetle package free, which was awesome. And then I've also got some carrots, cut up carrots in there. I put those in there several times a week. Well, actually, it's one of my daughter's jobs. She gets paid to feed them the carrots. So she put those in. I also put cat food and crickets and things like that, other vegetable slices and things. So for protein, the beetle jelly has some protein, cat food, fish food, dead crickets, that kind of thing. And then the nectar is approximately 1 part white sugar to 6 parts water. I use purified water. And then I add a tiny little pinch of salt in there. And that keeps them going. Now, to address the questions about which are the easiest critters to start with, beetles are probably going to be pretty easy. And depending on where you live, you may be able to collect some Eleotis beetles yourself. They're pretty widespread in many parts of the United States. They're quite common in the Southwest and just above the Southwest, as well as into the Midwest and so on. So you may be able to find some of those. Blue death fainting beetles, of course, are in the Southwest, and if you're in, Southern California, Nevada, Southern Utah, Arizona, places like that, you might be able to find those, and you'll definitely be able to find some desert darkling beetles of some type in that area. And they're probably the easiest to start with. If you can't locate any in your area, they're pretty easy to get a hold of. Bugs in Cyberspace is a great resource to be able to get some of those. The velvet ants are a little bit more difficult to source. They're generally only available in the late summer, early fall kind of seasons. I have collected, out of the ones in here that I have in here right now, only one of them that I collect, but all but one were collected in my state. The Azumatilia gloriosa are the white one that's running around right now, the little white one. I shouldn't say the little white one, the one that's not black and white. The black and white one is from Southern California, I believe. And that one was a gift from Bugs in Cyberspace, which was awesome. And then the other ones were a gift from my cousin, who did collect them in my state. And then all the others were collected in my state. One I collected myself just a few minutes from here, and the other 3 were collected by someone else living a little bit further south. His name was Dan, and I had a video about the unboxing of that. So, you can collect velvet ants yourself in many parts of the United States. They tend to be found alongside either hard-packed soil or dry sandy kind of paths, and especially in the South and the Southwest is where you can find them. But they can be found in other places as well. And the clown beetles can live several years. The blue death fainting beetles can live up to 17 years. There's at least one account of that. And then the velvet ants usually live only 1 to 2 years, and not even always that long, partly because you don't know how old they are when you collect them. To get to the question about breeding blue death fainting beetles and how easy or hard it is, keeping them is usually pretty easy, although there's sometimes what appears to be some kind of parasitic infestation that can kill them off shortly after people get them, where they start walking funny and then something seems to be exiting from their abdomen, and then they usually die there shortly thereafter. But if you can get over the first little while when you're keeping them, that seems to be when that happens, then they tend to survive pretty well for a while. I mean, I've had some losses in the ones that I've kept, definitely, but I've also had others that have lasted a long time. So once again, you don't know what age they are. Breeding them is trickier. It's easy to get them to lay eggs. Mine lay eggs all the time. It's easy to get the larvae to start producing or start growing, as long as you make sure you have substrate that has some nutrients to it and is not too dry. That's the key there. And then as far as getting the larvae to pupate, you have to keep them quite warm, between 80 and 88 degrees, and closer to 88 seems to be better. And I currently have some incubating right now in an incubator. So we'll see how that goes. But basically you put them alone when they get to about approximately 2 inches long. You put them in a small container of substrate in an incubator at 88 at about 75 to 80% relative humidity, and then wait several months. And that's currently the state I'm in. So Ken, because Ken of the Kaiju ISO channel is in Arizona, he could collect all kinds of velvet ants and blue death feigning beetles, and depending on what part of Arizona you're collecting in, but other desert darkling beetles, so you could quite easily collect your own. I would suggest, if you're looking for the beetles or the velvet ants, you try either fairly early in the morning or in the later evening. That's when they tend to be the most active. So Ken, I hope that gives you an idea, but I'm happy to answer any additional specific questions you have on that topic. I think it's a great topic, and I think it's relevant to a lot of other people as well. And I love that you're interested in starting out with that. So I'll cover what I can if you have other questions about that. So I'm also going to answer a question from Swanee, another patron. And Swanee says, I have noticed some mites on my ivory millipedes. I can't find any good information online stating whether or not this is an issue. Have you seen this before with your ivory millipedes? Would you suggest I try getting rid of them? Thank you. Well, let me give you a website that will help, and I'm also going to talk about it. There is a website. I learned early on about millipedes from this website, and the owner of the website, person who put it together, he's the one who bred the flame-leg millipedes that were the first species of millipedes I ever kept. But basically, what he said is that there are several different types of mites you might encounter with your millipedes. One would be grain mites, and they are just basically an annoying sort of pest just because they're around and they're eating a lot of the excess food. And the best way to get rid of them is make sure you're not providing so much food that the millipedes can't handle most of it, because they will breed like crazy if they have excess food. There could be soil mites in there, which really aren't a concern at all. They tend to stay in lower populations and they don't bother anything. So grain mites are really annoying. I haven't had problems with them for years, but I had problems with them early on. Springtails, healthy population of springtails in with your isopods can help combat those. So you've got those two, and then you've got commensal mites, and they are somewhat common with certain types of wild-caught millipedes, and they will crawl on the outside of them, but don't actually hurt the millipedes. And then you've got the parasitic mites, which remain in place. They tend to stay fixed in one spot on the millipede. If you see them fixed in one spot, like they're attached in a place where they can get between the chinks in the armor, so to speak, of the millipede, then you've got a problem. So those are predatory mites, and you'll need to address that. But if it's the other types of mites, it's probably not so much of an issue. Grain mites, controlling the grain mites is where you want to go with that. But if it's the soil mites or the commensal mites, you probably don't need to worry about it at all. So hopefully that helps, Swanee, and thank you for your question. So I'm going to try to catch up with the rest of the chat, and I really appreciate the questions from our supporters at Patreon. So catching up now. So Kale, how are your springtails? What kind of permit do you need to sell them? I need a PPQ 526 permit, and I need to apply for it. I haven't applied for that just because I've been crazy busy with other things going on, but I plan on doing that. I do have a PPQ 526 permit for the isopods that I sell, with the ones that I ship out of state. So I've done it before. I know how to do it. I also have a PPQ 526 permit for millipedes that I keep, not one to ship them out, but one to have them shipped to me. So how are the rubber ducky isopods? Doing well last time I checked. No babies yet, but most of them are quite young of the ones that I have now, so that kind of makes sense. Theropod Hunter, hey. Rodrigo Garcia, hello. And thank you for the background. This is actually used to be in my snake enclosure, and I had to remove it, and I had to cut it in pieces to remove it, so I decided to repurpose it. And I have a piece behind this, and I have a piece behind, or a couple pieces behind my blue death feigning beetle enclosure. And Maxwell Aquino, can you cover isopods in a video? Which specific ones? I've actually made a lot of isopods videos, but I'm happy to do more, and I'm planning on it. So, VB23. You know, one of the best places to communicate is Instagram. Actually, if you go to Aquarium Pets on Instagram, I will be able to communicate with you. That's probably the best way. And oh wow, I just got a message from a new supporter on Patreon. So thank you, Alex. That's awesome. It just showed up on my screen. That's the first time that's happened during a live stream. So that's very exciting for me. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Alex. So I'm catching up here. Let's see. How often do you get babies with the morning geckos? It varies, but in the warm months, I usually get about 2 eggs per female per month-ish. Sometimes they skip a month in the summer, but that's about how many. Something like that. And Elijah Armstrong found a superworm beetle in your Pac-Man frog tank. Yeah, it happens. I put superworms into our leopard gecko enclosure on purpose so that they would pupate, because they'll dig into a corner somewhere and find a place where they can pupate in peace, and then I'll pull them out and put them into my superworm breeding bin. So it's kind of cool. So Kermit, the hermit crab, is it hard feeding animals fruit flies? They're one of the main things holding you back from certain animals like dart frogs and Indian grass mantises. In my experience, fruit flies are pretty easy to deal with. I've been breeding them for years. Of course, I always use the flightless fruit flies. Using the flighted ones would be absolutely prohibitive. I would not recommend that at all, of course. But so I hope that helps. They're really pretty easy to do, and the main thing is you're going to lose some. Some of them will get out, so you have to make put some apple cider vinegar out in shallow dishes to trap them. And Petrinet, what's a Patreon member? Well, basically a Patreon member is someone who goes to patreon.com/aquariumax or to any creator of YouTube or other content, and then you can sign up to pay a certain amount of money to help support them, and that is what helps keep Aquarium Pets going. So you can pay as little as $1 a month, and you can pay more than that. It depends on what you do, and you get certain benefits for doing that. Like that's why I answer questions at the beginning of live streams for my Patreon members and so on, because they're supporting Aquarium. I mean, I try to do it anyway for everybody, but I try to make sure I answer their questions in depth near the end of the beginning of the stream, kind of thing, as a special thank you. So is the feeder labeled nectar just a hummingbird feeder? Actually, it's an ant feeder, specifically for pet ants, but it's the larger version. It's a mega feeder that works well for velvet ants. Jumping spiders don't live all that long, depending on the species, but the species I'm familiar with might live a year to a year and a half. So Gonzo, Walsingham, how is the availability of velvet ants in the UK? I think we have some species here, but I don't think there are any like the amazing specimens in your Viv. Well, I do know you have them there, but I don't know a lot about which species or how available they are. I don't really know that at all here. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit closer to the vivarium for a minute here. It often tends to spook some of the creatures, but it's just sometimes it can be fun to watch them more close up. And trying to catch up here. I lose the chat every time I move. Okay. Let's see. So yeah, I wish I knew more about velvet ants in the UK. I don't know a whole lot about that. Are there arboreal creatures for dry desert environments? If so, which invertebrates are best? I recently bought an acrylic tank and it warns that it's not suitable for humidity. Well, I would say that there are a lot of the beetles will climb a lot on structures that are available. My beetles and the velvet ants, in fact, will crawl on the wood a lot. As you can see, one of them is crawling on the wood right now. And the velvet ants, in certain conditions, can even climb on the glass. So, to a certain extent, they are arboreal. Some of these velvet ants are typically found in bushes or near bushes. So And the beetles, you know, like I said, they can be climbing. They can climb a lot too. So, still catching up on the chat. Okay, so Zephos has had beetles get stuck in the jelly. I haven't had that problem, but scooping it out of the cup could be a good way to avoid that. You can see one nibbling on the carrot there. I'm trying to see if I've got any. I'm going to scoot over here for a minute. See if any of the blue death-finning beetles are out in the breeding enclosure. I think it's a little early for them still. See, this is the side where I just mostly have coarse sand, and then over here I've got a substrate that has fermented wood and leaf litter and compost and buried pieces of decomposing oak and so on like that to help the larvae. But I don't, and there's some beetle jelly over here. I don't see any of them out at the moment. I do see one hiding. I don't know if you can see it right about in the middle of the screen right now, hiding under the driftwood there, or not the driftwood, the sagebrush and the cholla cactus wood. Not very active right now, but that could change. We can see what we get. Okay, I'm sorry everyone, I'm not going to be able to catch all of the chat, but I'm going to try. Oh, do I sell blue death-finning beetles? I do not. I'm hoping if I can get them captive breeding, I may eventually do that. But I don't currently do that. Raising some of my mealworms beetles, any tips on what to feed them? The mealworm beetles will eat the veggies that you put in there for the mealworms too. You don't have to do anything special with that. If you're putting things like carrots, sweet potato, whatever in there, they'll eat that. Here's some velvet ants demonstrating their arboreal tendencies. This is my one of my Desimutilla vestita. It's one of my orange ones. I have some red ones in here as well. A couple of red ones. And I just like them all. And glad to see it, Ken. I'm glad to hear that I was able to answer the questions for you. That's awesome. Thank you for asking such great questions that inspired this, big chunk of this video. So, can you keep house geckos as pets? Can be done, yes. I have not done it so much, but I keep mourning geckos, which show up in houses, some places, but yeah. So this feeder, if you wanted to buy this, if you go to any of my Velvet Ant Best Pet Invertebrate video, in the description, then you would go, you'd go to the description of that video, the Velvet Ant's Best Pet Invertebrate, and it has a link directly to this feeder, if you would like that. So hopefully that helps. Catching up here. Jordan Safala in the house. Excellent. Austin C. Your mom made fun of you for wanting to get beetles. That's hardly fair. Spanish orange isopods need high humidity. Well, they need a humid area at least, and they can get by in higher humidity without as much of a gradient as some species, but it's always best to provide a gradient so that they can get to a moist, mossy area whenever they want to, but they can also leave it whenever they want to. Easiest live food for mourning geckos in my case, fruit flies, because I'm already, I've been breeding them for years. But confused flower beetles are a good one too. They're super easy. So I got most of my death-finning beetles from bugs in cyberspace, but I have gotten them from some of them from other people too. And I'm still working. I think I have some pupating right now, but I don't know for sure. I'm just waiting on them to come out. Oh, Bug Slayer. I know how that goes. You see something and then you want to collect it and start keeping it, and then suddenly you can't find it anymore. Totally know how that goes. And I am hoping Horrific Dude to do a video on jumping spiders. Actually, I've already recorded part of a First Friday feeding for my jumping spider, but I want to do a Best Pet Invertebrate one, but I'm trying to set up a collaboration for that. So light bulb newt scamander. The light bulb, it totally depends on size of your tank, ambient temperature in your room you're keeping them in, and so on. You really don't want it, you do want it to warm up a spot a little bit, but you want to make sure you still have a thermal gradient so they can cool off if they want to. So I've used various bulbs. Since this is such a shallow tank, it's basically a 5-gallon lowboy tank. This is just an LED light. You can't really see it, I don't know. Just a LED bulb. I think it's equivalent to 65 watt incandescent bulb. So when I touch this, it's slightly warm to the touch, and it does warm up this spot right under it a little bit, but not a lot. And that seems to work really well for right now. But I've used compact fluorescent bulbs and basking bulbs. Like in my beetle tank, this is a 50 watt basking bulb for reptiles, kind of the bluish ones. You can see here the kind of blue light coming out of there, hopefully. That warms up this spot quite a bit, but then this is a tank that is a lot bigger, so it's easier to maintain a temperature gradient in it because it's a 20-gallon long. So it's a lot different. And let's see. Still trying to catch up. So Daphnia, oh, I love Daphnia VB23. I've been keeping Daphnia for years and years. I started keeping Daphnia when I was, I think, around 13 years old. And I haven't kept them all the way through since then, but probably a big chunk of that time. So, and thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. I can't actually keep roaches because my wife has asked me not to. I probably would, though, otherwise. And biggest challenge, if any, you kept to experience while keeping velvet ants, toilet Pete? Probably at the just the learning curve and making sure that they stayed well hydrated. And this feeder really helped with that because they can get dehydrated fairly easily. Let's see. And Roachant, I'm thinking about doing that for 35,000 subscribers. Doing like a room tour. I haven't done one since 15,000, so it's about time. And ZT2 cans are your best pet invertebrate videos inspired by Clint's Reptiles Best Pet Reptile videos? Kind of, yeah. I know that there are lots of best blank on the internet. It's just it's an SEO thing, search engine optimization thing. So I did some work with search engine optimization a few years ago. And so I was familiar with that concept, but then when I saw Clint doing his Best Pet Reptile ones, I thought, oh, that's cool. I don't want to compete directly with what he's doing, but I can do invertebrates, and because I keep invertebrates, and it seems like a cool way to do it because it's SEO friendly. So that did kind of help me start on that track, yeah. And jumping spiders, Maxwell, usually eat flies. They can eat other things, mealworms, crickets, and moths, and so on, but flies are one of the best foods for them. My morning geckos get a lot of crested gecko diet, and fruit flies are their main foods, but I do feed them flower beetle larvae and small crickets and stuff like that as well. Jumping spiders know to eat things their own size and bigger, yes. They will take down food that is larger than they are on occasion. And aquatic isopods, I have kept those. My first isopod I ever kept in bred actually was an aquatic species, a freshwater aquatic species, and then I've also had saltwater aquatic species, small ones, but I haven't had any for a while. So ZT2 cans, what would you suggest for an Exoterra Nano? I was thinking of either death-finning beetles or if I can convince my parents some type of tarantula, but I'd love to hear more options. Okay, well, those can be a good option actually for a jumping spider as well. Velvet ants, another one. And tarantulas, of course, I think is a good option, so is death feigning beetles, or other type of desert beetle. And several types of mantis could do well in there, as long as you make sure that that you can regulate the humidity properly and make sure they have a good molting platform when they are immature. And then when they're mature, they don't need a molting platform anymore, but they still need some humidity regulation. So those are some options. Hello, Stacy. Jackson. Your new room gets to about 65. How can I bring it up to about 73 to 75 for my geckos? Depends on which type of gecko you have. If you have cresties, gargoyle geckos, other New Caledonian geckos, or you have morning geckos, for example, you don't need to bring it up. A nighttime drop of 65 is fine. But it depends on your type of gecko. Oh, I'm sad to hear about the jumping spider. Yeah, they do have fairly short lifespan. Some types of tailless whip scorpions could actually do well in there, that's true. Ghost mantis is a good suggestion as well. I'm going to check out the multis. I know that, and thank you, Ridge. I know that I haven't seen Wally here. I guess he wasn't able to make this stream. But I wanted to show what's going on in my multi-tank. Last stream he asked how they were doing, and I said, well, they're doing well. I've got lots of fish in here. But I haven't seen any tiny fry, just, juveniles. And then this week, I've seen 3 separate fry nests. I've got one right there in the center of the screen. Seen some fry over there, some fry in what's now the center of the screen, and then some fry over here. Just got 3 different places for fry. And the fish are looking a little frightened. I think I'm scaring them. I just wanted to show you, I've got a ton of water lettuce that I put in here and some hornwort. And whoa, 83, it's getting a little warm in there. Might want to adjust the heater a little bit. But they're doing really well for me. I don't think they're exhibiting any signs of stress from 83. It's just a little bit on the warm side, but I don't think it's a huge deal. So I just wanted, this is kind of for Wally because he always checks in on the shell dwellers. And they're doing really well. So roach ant, would I ever keep ants? I'm actually going to feed these guys for you. Just bear with me for a second. It's going to be logistically a little bit complicated for me to do this, but I'm going to do it. There's one of my garter snakes. I just fed them. Let's see. I'm going to feed them some live brine shrimp, and that entails using one of my hands in a way that is not particularly easy. So please bear with me as I do that. I also can't check the chat while I'm doing it. It's just going to take me a second though. Be right with you. Just harvesting some brine shrimp right now. Love this feeder, or this hatchery. Only takes a second to harvest, and I can do it with one hand, which is awesome. Boom, did it. Okay, now let's feed these guys. Okay, I'm going to dump the food in on this side. There's a bunch of baby brine shrimp. And let's see, that should get them going, huh? Oh yeah. You can see I've got a pretty good population going. There's a fry on the left side in that the first nest that I discovered. You can see it popping up. Oh, I can see some fry over here too. Let's check them out. How many do we have over there? I see at least 2. If I get closer in there, maybe I can focus in on them. I don't know how many there are actually down there, but looks like at least 2. And let's see, catching up on the chat. I would keep ants. I think I was talking about that before I somehow changed the subject. But yeah, I have kept ants before, and I would do it again. Okay, the anonymous toucan, you asked a question on Patreon. Okay, I will have to check it out. And Jordan, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate that, and let me know what I can do for you. So I will see if I can get to your Patreon question on my phone and answer it while we're here. So basically, the anonymous toucan, this is how it works, just to give you the information, is that generally I post on Patreon and ask a question, you ask a question, I post a question, sorry, I post and say, what are your questions? And then you ask, and then I'll answer them in the live stream later, but I'm going to answer your question right here because you asked today, so I'll do it. So, is breeding Darkling beetles the same as breeding other species of desert beetles? Not necessarily. This is a great question. But since many of the desert beetles people keep are Darkling beetles, I can say that probably not all of the beetles you find in the desert are Darkling beetles, but many of them are. But if you're talking about like breeding Eleodes desert clown beetles, for example, then it's not necessarily the same as breeding blue death fanning beetles. Blue death fanning beetles have very specific temperature requirements in order to be able to pupate. Some of the other beetles do not have the same temperature requirement issues. Many of them do need to have the larvae separate in order to be able to pupate successfully, but not all of them. So hopefully that answers your question, but let me know if you have any other specific things you'd like to know about that. And hopefully I was able to catch that in time. Sorry, the chat's going kind of crazy and I missed some things. And thank you, young lad, I appreciate that. The floater plants are dwarf water lettuce and there's some hornwort in there as well. Heather Jensen, thanks for joining in. I'm sorry you weren't able to catch the earlier part. Would I consider getting aquatic isopods again? Sure. Yeah, I would. Oh, the mealworms turn into, to be specific. Okay. So that's actually much easier than breeding most desert beetles. Basically, you just keep them as you're keeping the mealworms. You may want to separate the pupae from the larvae, and then let them pupate into beetles, and then once they are beetles, separate them from the pupae and just feed them as you would the mealworms, and they will breed. So they're super easy. So hopefully that helps. And do you plan on ever keeping any macrobranchium shrimp species? I don't know. I probably would if I had a chance to. I've read a little bit about some of them, but I've never actually kept any. I do keep, right now I just have Opaiula and some Neocaridina. Have you ever heard of the spined isopod? I've heard of a couple different spiky isopods of different types. So where would you buy aquatic isopods from? Good question. If you're getting the saltwater type, all you have to do is go buy some live rock in a reef store, saltwater aquarium store, and there will be aquatic isopods on it. That's how I got my saltwater ones. And I even collected some in the wild when I lived in Hawaii. And if you, the freshwater ones, I haven't really found a good source for them. So Ridge, question about the scuds. This is my isopod and scud culture. Sorry that it's so cloudy, but cloudy is actually a good thing in this case because there's a thick layer of algae growing on the glass and they eat it. So they're doing really well. They're all over the place. There's a big pile of them on the substrate eating an algae chip. They really go crazy for that stuff. So they're doing really well. And I did, Newt Scamander. I lived in Hawaii for 3 years. So Z-Floats, where would I get an ID for my tentative beetle that no one can seem to figure out? Have you gone to bugguide.net? That's my suggestion. Okay, so the anonymous toucan is asking one more thing about the mealworm. So, like, how do I find the pupae if I spelled it right? You will know the pupae. Let me see if I can pull some out for you. Just a second. Okay, I've got... Oh, I just moved them. Where'd I put them? Just a second. I've got a mealworm culture right here. I'll show you. So you can see some beetles in here. There's some fresh carrots that my daughter's just added. Some beetles. What I do is I just use, I keep the mealworms, the beetles, and the pupae all in the same enclosure with the leaves. And let me just see if I can find a pupa for you. They're usually pretty easy to find, but they do go in cycles. Here's one. There's a couple of them right here. And they just look like this. That's the mealworm pupa. And if you leave them in an enclosure with the adults or the larvae, and there's not enough food or hydrating foods to keep them well hydrated, they will eat these. They'll nibble on them and kill them. So separating them out can be a good way to make sure that they do well. But you don't have to necessarily. I find that if I keep a lot of leaf litter in here and make sure they get plenty of carrots, they usually do fine. So hopefully that helps too. Superworms and mealworms, very similar kale in the way that you raise them. The main difference, and I'm gonna put these guys back here. The main difference is that superworms need a little bit of humidity, more than the mealworms, a little bit. And then there's another difference, and that is that they will not pupate unless they're separated from each other. So the best way to do that is to just put them in a small container once they've reached mature size, without food or water, a little bit of ventilation. Leave them there in the dark for a few weeks, and then they will pupate. And then once they've pupated and become the adult dark coloration, they're ready to go. You can put them with other beetles and they will mate. So, and thank you, Jordan, for joining in. Really glad that you did. Thank you for the super chat. Very, very appreciated, and glad you were here. Okay, catching up now. And yeah, it's cool that isopods have gills. Isn't that interesting? Oh, it's Kate. It's Make It Kate, or The Little Things Kate. That's your other channel, right? Awesome. Awesome to have you here in the stream this week, too. Whoa, that beetle's really going to town on those carrots. Seems to be enjoying that. And Newt, yes, I did see a lot of mourning geckos in Hawaii. That's how I kind of fell in love with them. So Heather Jensen, I have something in my snail tank that I can only describe as very active, teeny, thin white worms. You know what they are and how to get rid of them. They might be enchytraeid worms, like grindle worms or white worms. If they're much smaller, they might actually be some kind of nematode. In either case, they're not necessarily harmful, but getting rid of them is a little bit tricky. Are they really, really tiny? Are they small, like a quarter of an inch, or bigger than that, or much, much smaller than that? A millimeter long? Okay. If I could have any crazy species of anything, what would it be? Well, there's some pretty crazy species of snakes I'd love to keep. Thank you, Denise, for being here. Have you ever considered Brevicornis? That's that isopod species, that kind of crazy big one, sometimes called the commando isopod. Is that the one I'm thinking of? I could be wrong. I can't quite remember. I think I've thought about it, but I'm not sure if that's the one I'm thinking of or not. You're going to get some of the big beetles down in Millard County. Awesome. That would be cool. I would love a couple of those. They have some really big ones down there. I've been down there and seen some of them, but it's been years since I found any. So the insect running around ridge in the back there, sometimes they are called panda ants, or velvet ants is probably the most common name, but yeah, basically panda ant has been used for that. Would rotifers be considered the aquatic equivalent of springtails? In terms of being used as a small food, very small food, live food, yeah, I guess you could say that. That kind of makes sense. Kind of an off-topic question. I recently bought some Rapacious morning wood for my millipede, and I was wondering when or how I should use it. She seems to do okay without any supplemental foods, and a lot of them will. But you can either just sprinkle the powder on something like a piece of cork bark or a magnolia leaf, something where it's not going to just get in the substrate and get icky, and offer it dry, or you can cook it, prepare it according to the package directions and offer it as more of a chunk. You know, if you prepare it the way they say, you can do either one. And the millipedes will usually go after that stuff. They're probably at most half an inch long. You're probably dealing with enchytrated worms like grindleworms or whiteworms and heather, if they're that size. They're not necessarily a bad thing, but it's one of those things where they're really hard to get rid of unless you replace all the substrate. You take everything out, put them on like a slightly damp paper towel, you know, the creatures you want to keep, and then completely replace the substrate and wash out the container and that kind of stuff. Super hard to get rid of otherwise. Let's see. Oh, Crystal, you're raising mealworms too. Awesome. Oh, tentacled snakes are very cool. I know a guy who bought some, but I've never kept them. And Angela, I don't seem to be freezing up on my side, but I'm not sure what's going on. So, Bugman, I buy my beetle jelly from Bugs in Cyberspace. I also make it. I have a recipe video for do-it-yourself beetle jelly. You can do that too. But if you want to do it just easily, then just buy it. Bugs in Cyberspace has got it. And Kiara, welcome. Glad you caught another stream. Let's see. So Pup is not able to hear me very well. Is anybody else hearing me? Just a second. I'm going to see if I can adjust my audio slightly to get some better sound. Let's see if that's any better. Okay. How's that? How's that? Okay, so Rochant, let me show you what I got for my snakes over here. Okay. The lighting right here is not UVB, but one of these bulbs is UVB, and because UVB doesn't go very far, I have this kind of tower of cork bark so that they're getting some UVB when they're basking up here. They're getting heat from one of the bulbs and they're getting UV from the other. So yeah, I do provide UV for my garters because they're a diurnal snake. Our corn snake doesn't currently get any UV, but they're more of a crepuscular or nocturnal snake, so it's not that big of a deal. But the garters spend quite a bit of time basking here and get some UV that way. I do bring our corn snake outside when the temperature is good, and you know, that will sometimes he'll get a little UV that way. I know Histerdude from Arachnoboards, yeah. Do I have any mammal pets? Right now we only have a cat, but I have had various mammal pets. I've bred hamsters when I was a kid. I've had gerbils, rats, mice. I've had sugar gliders, rabbits, things like that. So I have kept some mammalian pets as well, but the only one we have right now is a cat. Let's see if we have some blue death feigning beetle activity. Not yet. Interesting. You want to see what's going on in the incubator? Let's check it out. I'm going to scoot these things over. These are where the blue death feigning beetle larvae are hopefully pupating. It's got a temperature of 88.7 degrees and humidity at 77. And then these are the containers where the beetles are hopefully pupating. But nothing to show yet so much. Hopefully sometime soon. Okay. So, oh, I've got my wires crossed here. Can we see the Leopard Gecko cleanup crew? We can do that. Sorry, just a second. I'm gonna bring you over to the Leopard Gecko cleanup crew. It's in the other room, but I can do that. You'll just see my ceiling for a minute while I get over there. We ever had a Pac-Man frog? Have not. So I moved my mic to see if that would help. I'm not sure what else I can do at this point with the sound. I moved my mic closer and it's a little bit weird. I'm sorry it's not working out for you. Let's check out on the cleanup crew here on the Leopard Gecko. Oh, there's a cricket. She didn't eat. Let me check out what's going on. There are a bunch of Porcelionidae pruinosus in the leaf litter there. I've been taking out the superworm beetles because I'm breeding them. So whenever one shows up in here, I take them out. And that's why you're not seeing any of those at the moment. There's probably some pupating, and so it's a pretty robust population of the Porcelliones pruinosus. I got the party mix in there, the blues, the whites, and the oranges. And that's what's going on. There's the leopard gecko thinking, oh, it's dinner time? It will be soon. And it will be dinner time for you soon. Okay, and there you go. That is the situation there. Okay. So Heather, you're going to get another Pac-Man maybe, but your husband's not all that excited about it, huh? Let's see. I'm going to switch back to this vivarium, desert vivarium, and catch up. Yeah, reptiles are pretty awesome. I gotta say, they're one of my favorite pets for sure. Pet groups, I should say. Yeah, I was breeding hamsters when I was, how old was I? 10, I think. I was about 10 years old when I started breeding them. I probably shouldn't have been breeding them, to be honest, but I did. Oh, excellent, Rodrigo. I'm glad that has helped you out. So the videos have helped you out. And no problem, Theropod Hunter. You can always ask. Oh, Angela, I'm sorry to hear that about that turtle. A little bit of sunlight each month, yeah, that's not going to cut it. He needs some stronger UVB for sure. Turtles are doing, there are some reptiles that can do well without it, like garter snakes can be kept and bred without any UVB as long as their diet is good. There are turtles that just can't cut that. It doesn't work for them. Here, the blue death-veining beetles are starting to wake up. Thought I'd show you guys. So for a Russian tortoise, which good springtail and isopod for the bioactive enclosure? I'd probably use Porcelliones pruinosus for the isopod. There's another one over there, smaller one. I think that's one of my males. And I would use Sanella curviceta or another humidity, another type of springtail that doesn't require a large amount of humidity. That's probably what I would do. And yeah, the substrate is doing really well in that enclosure. Let's see some isopods. Okay, what are we going to look at? Let's look at. I want to look at these guys. These are my punta canas. Can we do that? They've been starting to. These are fairly new culture for me, but they're starting to kind of pick up and breed, do their thing, which I'm excited about. Look at that. It's a fun morph of Armadillidium vulgare because you get so much interesting color going on in here. Okay, I'm trying to catch up on the chat here. Look at those guys. They're so colorful and interesting. So Matt M. Yes, I think I need to do a tour for 3,500 or 35,000 subscribers. 3,500 would be a step backwards. No, 35,000 subscribers. I need to do a room tour. I agree. Yeah, so Ken, sorry about the crickets driving the cats crazy. At least they're the banded crickets because they're quiet. But I am glad for the feedback, everybody, with the microphone. Yeah, so... Oh, you've got the little things, Kate. You have the oranges in your Punta Cana. Cool. This is a new colony, so I'm interested in seeing what I'm getting. Most of them appear to be just the ones with the kind of the bars of the yellowish sort of, or brassy sort of bars. But we'll see what I get. I think I remember seeing your Punta Cana in a video. I think that may have been the first place I saw them. I'm not sure. Kermit the Hermit, yeah, I agree. Isopods, inverts are some of the best pets. My Asian forest scorpion is pretty fun. And my Armadillidium vulgare don't seem to have breeding seasons. They just breed. And Cloud 9.5, I see what you mean. They do look a little bit like some of them look a little bit like the Dalmatians. And the Anonymous Toucan, yep, they are definitely roly-polies. In other words, roly-poly is a term for the type of isopods that can roll up. Neither more nor less. And Maxwell, there is a way to tell. They have these structures called pleopods in the male when you turn them over. Since they tend to roll up when you do that, and you have to have pretty good vision, they have to stay pretty still to tell. I usually don't bother distinguishing them. Some isopods are much easier to tell, like the large Spanish porcelios. The males have long uropods. Super easy to tell with those. But with these, it's not as easy. Oh, wow. So Heather Jensen with the gem mix. Yeah, I like the gem mix too. That is a very cool version because you got all those other things mixed into it. So Rochant, how long does your daily maintenance take? It depends. I have 3 kids actually working for me. None of them are working 20 hours, of course, but each of them basically get their allowance by working for me. And so taking care of critters, and I pay them for that. So it's hard to say because I'm not the only one doing all the work, because I couldn't do all the work that I would have to do to keep everything going. So I don't know, I should have them log their time more, but it doesn't take them each very long because they're all doing different parts of things. So sorry, that's a vague answer. So all right, thank you for joining in, Kate. Nice to see you. Hope to be in another stream soon. Will you ever get venomous reptiles? No. My wife has asked me to get nothing medically significant. I might get something really mildly venomous. I mean, technically, you could say that garter snakes are very, very mildly venomous, perhaps, but and that's not a problem. So maybe something like a hognose snake, but nothing significant. Okay. Well, thank you, the Anonymous Toucan. I'm glad you joined in, and I'm glad I was able to help you, and I really appreciate the help on Patreon. And Maxwell, the lighter color doesn't necessarily mean that, but there are some species where color can play into whether it's a male or female, but it's not a dependable thing you can just say about all the isopods. So these particular individuals are not wild caught. I purchased these, but they can be, there's certain types that can be wild caught, but not this particular morph in my area. Actually named after part of the island of Hispaniola in the Dominican Republic, I believe, is the area of Punta Cana where this particular morph is collected. Cool. So, oh, Leola, excellent. That white woodlouse is pregnant. Cool. You can probably get that morph isolated then. So, Heather Jensen, like this one right in the middle? Yeah, they're pretty cool. And the officinalis get pretty big too. And Angela, I don't need a reptile keeping license just to keep reptiles. To do certain specific things I would, but the kinds of things I'm doing I don't need to. An iNaturalist account. My son does, and I've helped him with his, but I don't actually have an iNaturalist account at the moment. I should get one. I do have a bugguide.net account that I use. So inbreeding effect isopods, hard to say. In general, it doesn't seem to be a big issue, but it's hard to say. And I haven't used Reddit, actually, but... All right. Oh, you know what? I'm realizing how late I am. And learning how to identify woodlouse species is just a matter of posting pictures, looking at pictures people have posted, and developing an eye for looking at the small details, basically. There are a lot of isopods I couldn't identify, but I do what I can. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in. This Friday, it looks like it's going to be a pretty big video. I'm excited about it. and I'd better go. So I will see you all, and stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for joining in.